Hi.
Greetings. In the Pure Worship book, we're at page 139.
Yes. Well, starting at 138. The subheading, Did Ezekiel see the great spiritual temple?
Yeah, I found it strange that they begin this first paragraph in here, and we're going to read the paragraphs, but they begin this section with repeating what they've just said.
On the same page.
About the fact that they used to believe this, and this, and they
for many years.
Many years, but the many years is a century, really. Since Russell's day, they have believed that somehow Paul's tabernacle and his explanation, they say Paul, but of course it's not Paul, it's the writer of Hebrews, whoever he is, left deliberately anonymous. And you keep saying Paul all the way through this section. That's one reason I don't want to read it again.
Okay.
It bugs me. But the other reason is because it's just belaboring a point that, well, we used to believe this and now we believe this. And what's the essence of what you now believe?
Yeah.
That this Ezekiel temple is more about the arrangements for pure worship, whereas Paul's, your Paul, Hebrews, you think, is Paul, is about the heavenly tabernacle and what God has done for what you call everlasting deliverance. And that's a phrase that we want to zero in on when we want to read that middle paragraph here, because I think even the word, even though you have it there right in the paragraph, you don't believe it.
Yeah, well, it's further study. That was the phrase they used as to why they've changed their minds about things. Further study.
So let's read
for a century, they didn't do any further study.
But does that inspire your confidence that you can trust what they say now about this?
Yeah.
When you know how long these many years are?
Mm-hmm.
So what does that one paragraph say, though? Let's look at it word for word.
So we'll just read the question that leads into paragraph 10. Are such repeated sacrifices offered up in the great spiritual temple? So they've just been talking about the Jewish system of sacrifices.
So they're contrasting the Ezekiel, which clearly has sacrifices going on, with the Paul that doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
The answer is clear and simple. Paul explains, when Christ came as a high priest of the good things that have already taken place, he passed through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands. That is, not of this creation. He entered into the holy place, not with the blood of goats and of young bulls, but with his own blood, once for all time, and obtained an everlasting deliverance for us. So in the great spiritual temple, only one sacrifice is offered ever. It is the ransom sacrifice, and it is offered by the greater high priest himself, Jesus Christ. Clearly, Ezekiel's visionary temple, with its many sacrifices of goats and bulls, was not the great spiritual temple.
So it's clearly now we have this perception, but for 100 years it wasn't. By the way, many in the premillennial camp in Christendom had this light long before you. They knew that the Ezekiel temple doesn't correspond to what Paul or Hebrews is talking about. So they already knew this stuff before you learned it in the 2010s. So the word that really bothers me, though, in that paragraph, the phrase is everlasting deliverance. What does that sentence say again?
He entered into the holy place, not with the blood of goats and young bulls, but with his own blood, once for all time, and obtained an everlasting deliverance for us.
So when a witness reads that phrase, everlasting deliverance, how does he imagine it?
Well, he doesn't think it's obtained. He thinks it's always just, if I keep up what I'm supposed to be doing, then it's not achieved.
So under the law, was everlasting deliverance ever offered even, let alone obtained?
No, you weren't saved by offering the sacrifices. You were temporarily forgiven, but you knew you would have to go again, and the high priest would have to do it again. And the high priest couldn't couldn't accomplish what Jesus could accomplish.
So the best construction you can put on that phrase as a witness is, well, everlasting deliverance, that means that
It's
Christ
obtained
has obtained the opportunity for me to get my everlasting life by means of obeying God perfectly.
Even that is not for sure. It's only as long as you keep doing what you're supposed to be doing.
But it's not everlasting deliverance then. And then you have another real serious problem, even if you believe that somehow you could get everlasting life as a gift in the way Hebrews lays it out here. Even if you believe that, because you believe what you believe about Jesus, you couldn't get it. Because you believe he's just a perfect man, and somehow a perfect man who is actually the embodiment of Michael the Archangel can give you everlasting life?
No.
How's that?
It doesn't fit with when Christ forgives sins on earth, the leaders object because they say only God can do that. Only divine person can give you forgiveness.
So here we are in chapter 9 of Hebrews, and throughout this whole section they've been talking about the book of Hebrews a lot. But you have not looked closely at chapter 1, where the writer of Hebrews, and I don't believe it was Paul, the writer of Hebrews lays down one foundational principle that makes all the rest possible. He doesn't get into stuff about the sacrifices and the high priest and Melchizedek. He doesn't get into that for a few chapters. What he wants to lay down first in Hebrews 1 is the divinity of Christ, which I admit is a confusing thing. Even for me, when I was a witness, I saw things in chapter 1 of Hebrews that disturbed me. So many Christians brought this up when I talked to them in any detail about who Christ was. They would frequently refer to this, and there were phrases in there and ideas in there that, shall we say, bothered me and maybe confused me a bit, but didn't convince me, because there were other things in there that I saw that I thought should have been confused and perhaps stumbled over. For instance, my God, the Messiah in here, the Son of God, is talking about his God. For me, that was a stumbling block. But the one that they were throwing at me as a potential stumbling block was also in here. Actually, there was more than one verse. So why don't we read it? And I this time I don't want to read it from the New World Translation, because there's all kinds of translation issues that we'd have to unpack. Here's the ESV version of Hebrews chapter 1. Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. So Christ's pre-existence is obviously stated clearly here. Yeah. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. So is this Michael the Archangel? It's certainly not a perfect human. It's somebody else who is called the Son here, his Son. It goes on. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. There's a thing that I never thought of in the old days. Why does the writer of Hebrews say he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty? Remember, when Christ is before the Sanhedrin, he says something very similar. He talks about sitting at the right hand of power. The power is a substitute for the divine name. Here you've got the Majesty. Why is the writer of Hebrews substituting descriptions for the name?
Yahweh or Jehovah.
That's right, you would. And you do that throughout here. Jehovah, all the time.
And
the
yet,
word is never used in Hebrews.
They don't do it actually in theirs. They don't put the name in there, but I don't even think they notice that is a substitute for Jehovah.
But about the majesty of the Son, he goes on, because he's talking about him sitting down after making purification of his sins, sitting down at the right hand of the Majesty, capital M, on high, having become as much superior to angels as the name he has inherited is more excellent than theirs. What's the name he's inherited? The Christians have an interesting take on this, that name is Yahweh, by the way. For to which of the angels did God ever say, "You are my Son, today I have begotten you"? So as John puts it, he's the unique, he is the only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father. He says it differently, But you get the same thought that, no, he's not just an angel, a created angel. He's something else in the bosom of the Father.
The point here is that he's never said this to an angel.
He's never said it to an angel. That's the main point.
Yeah.
Or again, I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. And again, when he brings the firstborn into the world, he says, let all God's angels worship him in their due obeisance, right?
Yeah.
As if all they're showing him is respect.
Yeah.
That's not the point here, is it? Of the angels, he says, he makes his angels winds and his ministers a flame of fire. But of the Son, he says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. So here, in this translation, and in the original Hebrew, these words are being addressed to Yahweh, God.
Yeah. Because it's a reference to, you said Psalm, right?
It's Psalm 102. But they have obscured that in the New World Translation by rendering it,
God is your throne.
God is your throne, which is a legitimate alternate translation of the Greek, but not of the Hebrew. So if you don't know the Hebrew context and that it was addressed to Yahweh, you might translate it that way. But they've shown their dishonesty by not acknowledging that the sense of the original is that Yahweh is being addressed.
And so the original text is about Yahweh. And here it's applying it to Jesus.
Yeah. And this verse goes on. This is the ESV going on. Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. The scepter of uprightness is the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore God, your God, has anointed you. So here we have one being addressed as God and Yahweh in the original, who also has a God. Do you understand where the Trinitarian idea comes from if you read this clearly? Therefore God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness beyond your companions. And then the writer goes on, and you, Lord, again this is from Psalm 102, you, Lord, laid the foundation of the earth in the beginning, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will remain. They will all wear out like a garment, like a robe. You will roll them up. Like a garment, they will be changed. But you are the same, and your years will have no end. Notice it's Lord in here. And in the original, again, we're talking about God and Yahweh. And then you realize that this reference to you are the same and your years will have no end has an echo in chapter 13, verse 8, where it says of Christ that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And I also think of Zechariah 13, verse 7, where it says something very mysterious in Zechariah. It says that Yahweh has a companion who is a man. Some translations say companion, some say associate. A man who is near him, some Bibles say. Who is this man that is next to God? And then, of course, the New Testament completely clears that one up. And to which of the angels has he ever said, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet? That's a good question for people who think he's the incarnation of Michael. The last verse says, are they not all ministering spirits sent out to serve for the sake of those who are to inherit salvation? So the angels are not even at the rank of the believer. The Christian believer has a higher status in God's eternal purpose and plan than the angels do. However, they are not the Son. The Son has a status way beyond them too.
The point is he's never said this to an angel. He says it to the Son.
Yeah. Then you have, of course, I just want to repeat what the ESV says in verse 3. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature. And he upholds the universe by the word of his power. That is said by Paul later in Colossians, that he upholds the universe, or is the coherent principle, which is what the Greeks thought of as the role of the Logos, who they associated with God, not a God.
So in verse 3 of the New World Translation, it says he is the reflection of God's glory and the exact representation of his very being. Wow.
No.
That sounds like divinity.
Yeah. And yet a man.
Yeah.
And that's the part you can't get your head around, right?
Yeah. It's difficult, but.
What's our link?
Oh, what is our link? Our link is. I don't know. What is our link?
Don't say we didn't write it down.
Oh, I don't have it written down here. You don't have it written down?
Nope. We'll just have to.
We'll put something in. Oh no, I have it. The link is Deity of Christ in the Early Church.
Oh, yeah.
The first of 3.
Yeah, that's an article, by the way, that you can find on onewonders.org. It's the Deity of Christ in the Early Church. It's an article I wrote many years ago because a lot of evangelical friends of ours were having a struggle getting their minds around what a lot of Christian scholars said, namely that the understanding of who Jesus was took time to develop. You can see the development even within the writings of the New Testament.
Yeah.
So follow the argument. It's only, I don't know, a dozen pages maybe. Follow the argument through those 3 videos in the PDF archive on our website. See you soon.